have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock.
Hello there. Welcome to the Bold Moves podcast. I am the host, Mandy Bryce. This is episode number 109, and I have a special guest today named Mark Sisson. We have already spoken with Mark's daughter, Devin, a few episodes back. If you haven't listened to it, I recommend it. But now we are talking today with Mark about his brand new book, which actually comes out tomorrow, and which you can win a copy of if you go to the show notes. Details at the end of the episode. But Mark is a person who has changed a lot of people's lives. I know at the very least he has changed the way that I eat, so I really appreciate that. And I hope you enjoy listening to us chat as much as I enjoyed chatting with him. Without further ado, here is Mr. Mark Sisson. Hello everyone, welcome to Bold Moves. I am with Mark Sisson, today's fabulous guest. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, my pleasure. So as you know, the name of the podcast is called Bold Moves, and I know you've made quite a few. Can you tell me a little bit about your story and why you're here on this podcast to tell about it?
Yeah, I guess my life is full of bold moves and pivots. Started out being very interested in health and fitness at a very young age, and read a lot of books on what it was going to take to live to 120 or 130 and be healthy and happy. And for some reason got started down this path doing aerobic exercise because that was kind of the conventional wisdom of the day back in the 60s. And then naturally gravitated toward books on performance and diet and how to use your diet to manipulate your ability to run long miles and put in that cardio stuff. So embraced a high carbohydrate, complex carb-based diet, and over a couple of years became a pretty decent runner. I was competing in anything from 5K, 10K marathons, eventually triathlons, Ironman. Did very well, but noticed that while I was getting fit and fast, and I looked pretty damn good on the outside, I was literally falling apart on the inside and had a lot of really bizarre maladies that I couldn't figure out the origin of. I had osteoarthritis in my feet. I had tendonitis in my hips. I had irritable bowel syndrome. Had heartburn frequently, got sick lots, got injured a lot. It was like crazy that I was supposed to be the picture of health.
Literally on the cover of running magazines, right?
Yeah, exactly. 3 covers of Runner's World magazine, and yet was kind of felt like a sham because on the inside I was not healthy, and that was really my original intent, was to be healthy. So I had to retire from high-level competition and kind of gear it back a little bit and figure out what it was going to take to be healthy and to extend my life and not be arthritic and in pain and keep full control of my faculties and all the things that we wish for ourselves. And that started this 35-year journey down a path of research looking for ways in which we can take the behaviors that we exhibit on a daily basis, the foods we eat, the types of movement we choose to do, sun exposure, the amount of sleep we get, how much play we engage in, and how those things affect gene expression, how our genes are always in a position to be turning on or off and rebuilding and renewing and regenerating us, either in sort of a positive fashion or in a negative one, because our genes can also cause us to become pretty sick if we don't flip the right switches. So my life has been about finding ways in which to uncover these hidden genetic switches and then to explain some of those, we call them hacks now. I'm not sure I like that term, but those shortcuts to the general public, and then offer the opportunity for people to make those choices if they want to.
I love that. So for anyone who's listening, at this point, the high fat movement has caught enough steam that I think a lot of people are familiar with it. But can you tell me a little bit more about how you've made that bold move? Because you mentioned that you've found the hacks and the discoveries through research and self-experimentation, but I really would like to hear how that was such a bold move and how that worked out in your life.
Well, 15 years ago, even as recently as 15 years ago, there was still this great attachment to a food pyramid that had lots, 6 to 11 servings of grains at the base of it, and had meat somewhere in the middle, and then fats under caution, used sparingly. And a number of us in the ancestral health movement, particularly the Paleo movement, and then when my primal variation of that came along, started to embrace the concept of healthy fats. Like, we need fats. We should not be avoiding the healthy fats. We shouldn't be avoiding the monounsaturated fats or the omega-3 fats. In many cases, we shouldn't be avoiding some of the saturated fats. We should be avoiding trans fats and franken-fats, the kind of partially hydrogenated fats and oils that you'll see in a lot of processed food. But the concept of all fats being bad has kind of been, cast aside in the last couple of years. And I think a lot of us in this movement were on the leading edge of that idea that fat is not the proximate cause of heart disease, and cholesterol is not, dietary cholesterol isn't either, and that there are other factors involved, and some of those factors have to do with inflammation and oxidation that come from eating some of the alternative foods that the food pyramid would suggest would be better choices. So there was this really ironic moment about 10 years ago when those of us in this industry started to think, well, wait a minute, all the stuff we've been taught, or most of it or much of it, has been actually wrong. Certainly that whole dietary paradigm about basing your diet on lots of carbs and a little bit of fat has been kind of tossed on its side. Certainly that notion that the more miles you ran, the healthier you'd be, has been cast aside. And we started talking about this concept of chronic cardio, where there's a point pretty early in your training where you can start doing too much work, and the benefits no longer accrue, and you start to damage yourself. I'm an example of that. A couple of years ago, I started getting issues with my heart from the 30 years of running my heart up to max 3 or 4 times a week, every week. That's just not right. That's just not good for the body. So that was another thing that we cast aside. Recently, there's been a whole movement looking at salt intake and suggesting that the health community's admonition that salt is bad for you, and that salt is the major cause of blood pressure, and blood pressure is a significantly bad issue in American health. That whole thing's been cast aside, and now some people are positing that we don't get enough salt. And
I know that I don't get enough salt.
Yeah.
I've passed out in heat, and it's because, you're doing a 20-mile walk and you're drinking water, but it's not staying in you because you haven't had enough salt.
Yeah. But I mean, on a daily basis, there are people whose heart issues may stem from them not having gotten enough sodium because they were of the erroneous belief that, any amount of sodium is bad and they should eliminate all sodium from their diet. So a lot of these conventional wisdom, statements that have been made over the last several decades have been found to be not only not true, but diametrically opposed to good health.
Sure.
Even something as simple as stay out of the sun, avoid the sunlight at all costs. Well, we're designed to be in the sun a certain amount of time every day, and that's how our bodies make vitamin D. And if we don't make vitamin D, we don't have access to this amazing vitamin that's largely responsible for our immune system. So, I would suggest that it may be that more people get cancer from having avoided the sun their entire lives than ever got cancer from too much sun.
Absolutely.
It's a weird kind of thing to think about, and yet those are the kind of statements, that I have made over the last decade that started out being like, what is he talking about? To, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's the concept that grains, that heart healthy whole grains are the best thing you can eat. Well, my life and my health really started to improve once I got rid of heart healthy whole grains.
Right.
So it's crazy.
I'm curious as to what kind of reactions you've had from all different types of people when you started sharing the results you were finding from your research and self-experimentation about all of these things that, like you said, are diametrically opposed to living a healthy life. How did people respond?
Well, I mean, some people go, good for you, and other people go, how can you possibly say that? You're ridiculous. You're not a scientist. You're not an MD. So how can you even make a statement like that? I'm blown away by the number of doctors who initially said that's rubbish, there's no way that's true, and now are coming around to understanding that saturated fat isn't the major cause of heart disease, that cholesterol is actually a pretty beneficial molecule in the body, and we just have to manage how we manufacture it and how we dispose of it. And people who are even dermatologists who would say, you know what, I agree, a little bit of sun is fine. Just don't get burned. Some
Right.
simple, adjustments to that sort of advice. But, it takes, I like being the sort of the leading edge guy who's coming up with a hypothesis that might not be readily accepted. But
Sure.
eventually, as you look deeper and deeper, go, wow, that's pretty crazy that that's actually true, that these assumptions that we've made all along about how the body works were at worst erroneous, or excuse me, at best erroneous, and at worst potentially dangerous.
I love that. I'm curious, since you said you like this, I would assume that maybe this isn't the scariest thing you've ever done, is challenging all of those things and being so vocal and public about it. What is the scariest thing you've done, and how did you push past any fear to make that happen?
I think the scariest thing I've ever done was when I was 43. I had a wife and 2 children, and I quit my job with no money in the bank, no savings, to start a new business, to start my own business, which is what's it's grown to today. But that first couple of years, it was it was more than a little scary to think that it may come to the fact that I can't feed my family because of this bold move that I've made. On the other hand, very few successful businesses get to be successful without making bold moves. So, in retrospect, it was a good thing to do, and it was the best thing to do. And I wasn't reckless about it. I mean, I had some predetermined ideas, and I'd done a business plan, and I knew that if I stuck to the business plan, it would be successful. But still, I didn't really have a fallback position.
Sure. And I know that you're doing well. I've read your books. I actually went to thank you before we started recording that I got a nice little keto kit in the mail, and it's a lot of the favorite products that we're buying all the time anyway. So I'm so glad that you made that bold move and it's paying off so well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So another question, and I'm really curious to hear this because I think you sort of shared some of it already, but what would you say your purpose is?
Well, my purpose is to change the way the world eats. I'm such a strong believer that diet is a critical component of health, that you can't have an awesome life unless you've gotten your health in order.
Sure.
And so many people either assume that they've been dealt a bad hand, or that they were unlucky, or that they were taught the wrong things, or they give up because they tried things that didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mission is to change the lives of tens of millions of people by having them understand how the body works, and how simple little changes in their diet, and how manipulations of their sleep and their play and how they exercise can have huge benefits in terms of their health and their enjoyment of life. So my purpose really is to change, first of all, to change the way the world eats, and second of all, to change the way the world understands how much power the individual has in manifesting good health.
I love that. And I agree with it wholeheartedly, because I remember when Tommy first started exploring Primal, he read the Primal Blueprint and started trying to tell me that, the food pyramid is wrong. You're really not supposed to have the 6 to 12 servings of grains. And I was like, but the food pyramid, and I tried not to. And I argued against him. And then I tried it and noticed that I wasn't falling asleep after my meals. And it just made such a huge difference in how I felt every day and like my energy levels. And I think a popular quote is, few people know how great they're supposed to feel. And I think it's so profoundly true. So I guess that ties straight into your mission.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And my wife, speaking of those quotes, my wife just put one on the board the other day, and I think she made it up. But it goes to the effect of, what if this was the greatest time in our lives and we missed it?
Wow.
And, that's kind of it's a profound kind of statement. Like right now is the best time of your life, as long as you take care of yourself and realize that you have this power to make every experience a good experience, or not. You also have the power to choose to be miserable and depressed and sad and in chronic pain and all this other stuff. But I think that the power of our ability to rebuild, renew, regenerate us, each of us on a daily basis is very, very awesome. And So few people get that. And that's really that's the basic understanding that I would like to impart to everybody. I don't want people to go, well, geez, well, what would Mark say or what would Mark do? But I want them to have this ability to make intuitive decisions because they have this knowing, and be okay with those decisions, even if they're not necessarily going to serve them in the short term. Just it's sort of, there's an element of having no regret attached to that as well. So, you say, well, I cleaned up my diet and I'm losing weight and I'm feeling better. I have more energy. I'm off the meds, but I had a big piece of chocolate cake last night. Well, great. I hope you enjoyed it, because, that was the point of having the chocolate cake, was to enjoy it, not to beat yourself up for the next 2 days because you did that.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Carrie's quote reminds me of something that I've shared on my podcast before, is that a lot of times when people come to visit, because our family are all in the Midwest and we live in California, I will sometimes eat things that I wouldn't normally eat, or drink like I wouldn't normally drink. And then I find myself falling asleep in the car, or being exhausted the whole time.
I hope not while you're driving.
Yeah, I'm usually, the back seat is like a knockout zone for me. I can't stay awake there. But I find that I'm sort of sacrificing quality time with people because I decided to splurge and have, a piece of cake. But I think I just need to get better at timing it, because I totally agree where, I'm eating healthy and exercising to live a long life, but what's life if you don't have cheesecake sometimes?
Right. But, but here's the thing. What is a piece of cheesecake? Is a piece of cheesecake, a piece that's only 3 or 4 bites, or is it a piece that's a wedge, or is it a piece that's a quarter of a cheesecake like you might get at the Cheesecake Factory? I mean, and that's the other thing, is if you can train yourself to go, 3 bites of cheesecake is really all I need to get the full experience of this. And anything beyond that is just me stuffing my face. Sorry, let me get my gate. Forgot that up. But anything beyond that, is, I hate to use the word gluttony, but it kind of is. Because the point is to have a couple of bites of a nice, sweet, thing that finishes off a meal. But dessert shouldn't be the meal that follows the meal.
True. Yeah.
And for some people, they'll eat a meal and then they'll have a 1,200 calorie piece of cheesecake.
Yeah.
So there's a skill that one of the things that we teach within the Primal Blueprint is, this ability to understand when you're no longer hungry for the next bite, it's okay to stop eating.
Sure.
If it's cheesecake, and seems to be what we picked up on as the theme here, wrap it up, put it in the refrigerator, and have 3 more bites tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or if it's at the restaurant, bring it home and freeze it and nibble at it over the next month. But it doesn't need to be, because you paid for it doesn't mean you have to finish it.
Yeah, I love that. And that's definitely one of the lessons that's taking me a little bit longer to learn than the day-to-day. One thing I'm curious about is, a lot of times when I explain, somehow paleo is more well known as a term than primal. And a lot of times when I explain, I say there are a few nutritional differences, but primal is more of a lifestyle than a diet. Can you speak a little bit to what separates the two from your standpoint?
Well, I mean, that's the best description. It's really a lifestyle. Primal is a lifestyle that includes ways in which you move. So we address aerobic activity and movement and sprinting and lifting heavy things. We certainly pay close attention to sleep. And I know the paleo movement has kind of, adopted sleep as another lifestyle factor that's really important. But I've been talking about it as long as I've been talking about primal, that we need to dial our sleep in if we want to have the best results in everything else we do. Mm-hmm. Again, we talk about sun exposure and the fact that it's important to get some sun. So we look at, the Primal Blueprint is a template for living your life based on not just the research in modern genetic science, but the clues that come from evolutionary biology, from human biology over the last 2.5 million years. Like, how did we get this genetic recipe that wants us to be strong and lean and fit and happy and healthy and productive, but expects certain inputs if we are to achieve that level of strength and fitness and health and happiness. And so we look to prior human behavior and say, well, okay, our ancestors moved around a lot. Our bodies we're bipedal. If you stop and think what that means, we're basically like a Segway. Like, how is it that we don't fall over all the time? Because we're not on 4 legs. If you ever stop and think about that, it just makes It makes no sense that we spend our whole time upright. How is it that the wind doesn't blow us over because we're only on 2 feet? Try to stand a ladder up and let it.
That's what I immediately thought of when you started speaking about that.
Yeah. So there are certain things that make us distinctly human, and movement is one of those things. We have to find ways in which to move around, all day long. I'm giving you this interview at my stand-up desk. You can see it. The people can't, but I don't see if I can show you here. But I'm leaning on a post, and I've got my pebble mat here down with my feet down below, and I'm barefoot on a pebble mat, and I'm moving around. You see me shifting positions every once in a while. I mean, that's one of the ways in which I'm able to maintain my sanity doing as much work as I do throughout the course of the day. But that also means taking breaks a lot and walking around. If you're in an office, walk around the office. Go have a group meeting. If you're going to have a meeting, walk around the office park or the building or down the street. I mean, there are ways in which we can figure out how to incorporate movement into our lives that take a little bit of thought, but do not give you the excuse that, well, because I'm at an office job from 9 to 5, and so I can't really do that. No. Everybody in my office in Oxnard, I have, 25 people up there. Everybody has a stand-up desk.
Yeah.
And if they want one, they have a tread desk. They have a treadmill under their desk, and they can walk. I have some of my employees walk 8 or 9 miles a day while they're doing customer service or data entry or stuff like that, because I want them to be healthy, and I want them to find ways in which to move. Yeah. So that's just one example. Then another thing about human behavior and millions of years of human history, lift heavy things. Our muscles expect us to exert themselves more than just a little bit fairly frequently. So I tell people, get to the gym at least twice a week, lift some weights or do some body weight exercises. I just prefer push-ups, pull-ups, dips, squats, lunges, things like that. And then sprint once a week. Our ancestors had to run for their lives on occasion. And I mean, all out as hard as you can go.
Something's chasing you.
Something's chasing you and you're going to die. So,
or you're really hungry and you're chasing something.
Or chasing after something. Yeah. Which if you don't catch it, you're going to die. Either way, it's a life or death kind of situation. And so, we use that sort of information and that sort of mindset to find ways in which to sprint on a regular basis. I just posted on my Instagram account the other day. I went to the track and did, some 200-meter sprints. I play ultimate frisbee every Sunday. And so I spend an hour and a half to 2 hours sprinting up and down the field, chasing a flying disc.
Just like our ancestors.
Just like our ancestors. Yeah, very well put. Yeah. Well, our ancestors back in the 50s when the frisbee was born. But or chasing a boomerang, if you're talking about an Aboriginal or something.
That works.
But yeah, so it's all, and then, sleep. I mean, our ancestors went to sleep. They didn't have beds. Went to sleep when the sun basically went down. And if they stayed up late, it was by firelight. It was like this orange yellow glow of a firelight, not by some blue light coming off of a screen that would interfere with the melatonin onset, which is how we sleep. So some of these are just like, they're almost obvious. One of my Primal Blueprint laws is avoid traumatic, stupid mistakes.
I love that one.
Wear your seatbelt, wear your helmet if you ride a bike or a motorcycle. Don't smoke. Don't drink.
Don't poison yourself. Is that?
Yeah. Well, that's avoid poisonous things is the second one actually. And the second one, the first actual one is eat lots of plants and animals, right? Which is basically what the caveat and the hidden text is: don't eat processed foods.
Right.
But then it's not enough to say don't eat processed foods. It's avoid poisonous things. And I would suggest at this point in our lives that, that like Coca-Cola is a poisonous thing.
Yeah.
I'll name them outright. I think any amount of any product in which you're delivering 25 to 45 grams of pure sugar
in the form of corn syrup, even
of high fructose corn syrup, is poisonous, and it's over time it's going to have an effect on you. You may get away with it now. What are you drinking right there, Mandy?
Water. Coca-Cola. Just kidding.
A Slurpee. So avoid poisonous things is basically cutting out the hundreds of grams of sugar that you might be taking in on a daily basis if you didn't know better. and it's certainly avoiding excessive amounts of alcohol, even though a little alcohol has been shown to be possibly good for your longevity. I'm not sure I totally buy into that, but so that's where we are with, again, looking at like our ancestors would avoid certain poisonous berries, right? They would avoid those berries. They knew enough to not eat them because of the taste of them or the smell or the lore that had been handed down from
someone else tried it and keeled over.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Yeah. So we've kind of covered basics of the Primal Blueprint, which was your first book, correct?
Yep.
And then now you have another one coming out, and it's with the topic of ketogenic eating, right?
Yes.
And I feel like that is becoming a new thing. Tommy and I have been having a lot of ketogenic meals for a while. So I guess similar to following what our ancestors did, it's still not a new thing. But can you explain a little bit about that and tell us a little bit about the book that you have coming out?
Sure. The book is called The Keto Reset Diet. It's reset your metabolism in 21 days to burn fat forever. What it is, it's basically the next iteration of Primal. So you and Tommy have been eating Primal for a long time. All the meals that you've been constructing have probably been Paleo or Primal. And the only difference recently in your going keto and making them ketogenic is that you maybe cut back a little bit on some other starchy tubers or starchy carbs. But any amount of fish or chicken or meat or eggs with some greens is a ketogenic meal. What makes it not ketogenic is bread, pasta, and then potatoes and sweet potatoes and some of the starchy carbs. So the only real difference here are the starchy carbs. And the keto, the term keto, which I'm trying to popularize as a way of living in metabolic flexibility, in the freedom of having greater metabolic flexibility, so that you can burn fats really efficiently. You can manufacture ketones as you need them and offset the need to take in glucose or take in carbohydrate to make glucose, and create this space in your life where hunger and appetite and cravings no longer rule the day.
Oh, it's so
where you
amazing.
that's the most amazing part of this, where you can skip a meal or two and not only not be hungry, but have as much energy or more than you would have had from the meal, to preserve muscle mass, to not get sick, to maybe have had some anti-aging benefits in repairing damaged cells, because that's one of the things that we know about being in a ketogenic lifestyle, is that certain epigenetic effects start to happen. That beta hydroxybutyrate, which is one of the ketone bodies, actually upregulates some pretty amazing self-preserving mechanisms in the body. Now, but the whole ketogenic thing has been kind of bandied about and tossed about the internet as this amazing panacea, and it's okay to go from eating 300 or 400 grams of carbs a day to straight into keto, and that'll change your life. And what we're seeing is there's a lot of like misadventures that people are having, where they have a miserable time getting into ketosis, because they've gone from depending on carbohydrates and sugars, and their brain, having spent the last 20 or 30 or 50 years doing that, to immediately withholding and withdrawing all the carbohydrates, and forcing the body into overproducing ketones, which then you notice in their breath and their urine, and they're all thrilled about, hey, my urine stick was deep purple today. I'm really successful at keto, but I feel like crap.
Right. And I can't do this very long because I just went cold turkey. So in a week when I eat a whole loaf of bread, let's see how we're doing.
And there's a rebound effect too. So I love the idea of metabolic flexibility. And that's the main reason for using the keto term at all. We use it as a tool, as a strategy to improve your metabolic flexibility. So even in the Keto Reset diet, we suggest, first of all, we take you into a 21-day, we ease you into it by basically going primal for 21 days, withholding some of those starchy carbs, getting rid of the sweetened beverages and all the crap that we all kind of know we need to get rid of, right?
Sure.
And getting into this area where, the carbs are between 100, 120, maybe 150 grams a day, but we're burning fat. We're teaching our body to become more reliant on fat, less reliant on carbohydrate. And then about halfway through the book, we have a midterm exam. And in order to pass the exam, there's some questions you have to answer about your energy levels and about your strength and about how much sleep you're getting. And if you pass the exam, then you get to go deep into keto. And by the way, going deep into keto at that point is such an easy transition, because as you've noticed, if you only, have to cut out some of the starchy carbs and take your meal from 35 or 40 grams of carbs, down to 15 or 20.
Right.
And it's a very easy transition. And that's the point at which you start to notice improvements in energy. That's the point at which you start to see the body starting to use some of its own stored body fat for fuel. One of the dangers of the keto movement outside of what we're doing is sort of this love of fat. Like, oh my God, that, it doesn't matter how much fat, don't count calories. You can eat all the fat you want and you'll be making ketones and that'll be great. And you'll melt away. Well, I'm seeing a lot of people who are leaders in the keto movement who are not melting away.
It's still input, output.
Right.
And that was a learning curve for us too.
There is still the reality that, we talk about CICO, calories in, calories out. It's not quite that simple, but it's calories burned versus calories stored.
Sure.
And as long as you burn more calories than you store, you will lose body fat. And so you can't just do it by cutting calories. There is a macronutrient ratio that will optimize it. You have to get a certain amount of protein to maintain your muscle mass. You have to cut the carbs down to basically turn on the spigot that makes ketones, and then therefore put you in a space where you don't even need glucose. You don't even need carbohydrates, but you have to get low enough in order to do that. You literally are teaching the body to build a metabolic machinery to burn ketones and to burn fat more efficiently. And over time, the muscles increase the amount of mitochondria they have, and those are these little furnaces in which the fat burns. And as you increase the amount of mitochondria, you're able to derive more of your energy doing more and more work from fat. Now, whether that fat comes from your plate or your thighs, or your belly or your butt, the body doesn't care. And if you've developed this amazing skill to access your own stored body fat and burn it, then you literally can go days without eating and not even notice a dip in energy and not lose muscle mass and, have all these amazing potential anti-aging benefits accrue. Now, I'm not even suggesting you have to do that. I mean, I really never say, oh, let's just go on a multi-day fast. Basically, what we're talking about is, like, I live my life. First of all, I have to tell you, I enjoy every bite of food I ever eat. And I am still a foodie. I love food and I enjoy every bite I eat. But I avoid poisonous things. I only put stuff in my mouth that's going to taste great. And I know when to stop. And the beauty of being in a keto zone, whether or not I'm in ketosis, sometimes, if I measured my blood glucose and my blood ketones, you'd go, oh, wow, you're 4.0 millimolar and your blood sugar is 75 or 80. It doesn't matter, because whether you're in or out of ketosis, if you built that metabolic machinery, you're still burning fats, you're still creating ketones at some level, and you're still reducing dramatically your dependence on carbohydrate to get you from one meal to the next. And so I live I use a compressed eating window. So I wake up in the morning, I'm not hungry, I'm full of energy. I have a cup of coffee just because I love the taste of coffee. By the way, did you read recently that people who drink coffee live longer than people who don't drink coffee?
I did, and I was sad because I'm a tea drinker.
Oh, well.
But I eat coffee sometimes.
There you go. Okay.
I like the smell and eating it, but not drinking.
Yeah. So, there's something about paleo, man. The smell of coffee, the smell of bacon, but
I had bacon today.
Yeah, there you go. But anyway, so I don't eat until 1:00. Today I ate at 1:30. And I'm perfectly energetic. I might take a break at 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the morning and go for a long paddle out on the ocean, or I might go to the gym and do a hard workout. I do it basically fasted from the night before because I don't eat after 7:30 at night. So I typically 12:30 or 1:00 in the day is my first meal. And then 7 or 7:30 at the end of the day is my second meal. And that's all I do. And my energy levels are as high as ever. I never feel like taking a nap in the middle of the afternoon. I'm my muscle mass is steady. And if I were to say that I wanted to take a 6-week program and start to put on more muscle, as long as I did the extra work, I could put on more muscle doing that. Everything about this keto lifestyle has improved. And that's since I started writing this book and was doing the research on it, because I've known about keto for 10 years.
Sure.
I've even spent a couple of days, a couple of weeks at a time in ketosis, and it was fine and it was great. And I, because I can go in and out, because Primal is so close to keto anyway. But spending time where you are restricting carbs to less than 50 grams a day for weeks at a time, I think it's going to become the new cleansing. It's going to become that new annual program that people do, whether or not you spend the rest of the year there or whether but I think what I'd like to see, and I'm going to do it for myself, is, certainly every year I'm going to spend 6 weeks to 2 months. And people say, well, Mark, why don't you spend all your time in keto? I kind of do. The only thing that kicks me out of keto is if I have something for dinner one night that is maybe 30 or 50 grams of carbs. And that will, shift me out of true ketosis. But you know what? I wake up in the morning, I don't eat breakfast, I do a hard workout, I exhaust the glycogen, I'm back to keto by the next afternoon. So
curious.
that's this metabolic flexibility that I'm talking about.
Sure. I'm curious with that. You said that, I don't know about your Facebook news feed or your Instagram, but mine is suddenly flooded with these prove it people and the ketones that you can buy and drink. I'm curious what your stance is on that. I think I know what you'll say, and it's probably what I think too, but I'd like to address it.
Yeah. So here's the thing. The good news is I use them for sports supplements. So if I've got a 2-hour ultimate frisbee game in the heat, I will drink a ketone supplement just before the game.
Okay.
And I notice a little bump in my activity, but I also know that as soon as I get there, I am going hard, and I'm going hard for an hour and a half to 2 hours. So I feel like I can kickstart my metabolism that way. Now, I don't use them other than when I'm doing a really, really hard workout or an event like that. And the reason is, by taking an exogenous ketone, I think your body goes, hey, we got plenty of ketones, we don't need to make any. You know, and the whole idea here is to take your body fat and convert it into ketones, some of it into ketones, and fuel the brain as much as the brain needs. And I said, and you say, well, why is it just the brain? Well, when you become good at this, when you become keto adapted and fat adapted, your muscles are so good at burning fat, they don't really even need ketones because they're really good at burning fat, and they still store glycogen. The muscles do not stop storing glycogen. So you can go 3 days without eating any carbohydrates at all, and your body will still store glycogen. It won't top it off to 500 grams throughout the body, but it might get up to 450 or it might get up to 425 or something like that. So, but I think that the notion that you can take an exogenous ketone drink and get into ketosis and start to lose weight, I'm not seeing any evidence of that anywhere.
Yeah, I've had people go as far as to tell me like, oh, I feel sorry for cheesecake today, but you can eat a whole big piece of cheesecake and then drink your prove it, and then you'll be back in ketosis. And I'm like, that still doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, so here's the irony. Here's the irony. That's ketosis as defined by the amount of ketones in your blood.
Sure.
So if you drink a ketone supplement, your ketones are going to go up, right? And that's not the goal. The goal is not to piss a purple stick or to have a 4.0 millimolar blood ketone reading. Sure. The goal is to be better at burning fat. And by being so good at burning fat that you make enough ketones to fuel your brain. So what we see is people have been keto for a long time and don't take these supplements. The definition of being in ketosis by some of the scientists is 0.5 millimolar or higher, right? You're aware of that?
Yes.
And so people who are new to ketosis will go, oh, I'm 4, I'm 5, I'm like, 8 times the requirement or 10 times the requirement. Well, people who've been in ketosis for a long time might measure 0.4 or 0.5. And you go, well, why is that? Well, why that is they're so good at this that even though they're only taking in 20 or 30 grams of carbs a day, Their body is making just enough ketones to fuel the brain. It doesn't need to make any more ketones. It doesn't need, the human body
Lowest
doesn't.
minimal dose, right?
Minimum effective dose. That's exactly
it.
right. That's the job of the body, Mandy, is to do only what it needs to do to get to the next day. And if you become that good at in the world of keto, that your liver's just saying, you know what, we don't need to waste energy making more ketones than we need, and we're going to spill them out in our urine and our breath and our blood. Let's just make enough to fuel the brain, because the brain has become so good and so adept at using ketones. The body makes enough fuel, glucose on its own from the glycerol molecule. So whenever the liver is making burning fat and making ketones, it's also making glucose. Because if you take a triglyceride molecule and you strip off the fatty acids and you're left with a glycerol, that glycerol becomes a raw material to make glucose.
Right.
So it's a very efficient system. So we talk about metabolic flexibility and we talk about metabolic efficiency. And one of the effects of the efficiency part of that is that over time you find you don't need as many calories to thrive, to get through your day with plenty of energy, to never get sick, to not lose any muscle mass, if anything, to gain muscle mass. And for some people who are now in the long-term keto, it's like mind-boggling. My friend Todd White, who owns Dry Farm Wines, the Paleo wines, eats one meal a day. He eats dinner. And I've asked him about it. And I said, Todd, that, and he's, by the way, he's fit, he's energetic, he runs a booming business. He travels a lot. He's on the go. His energy levels are always crazy through the roof. That's why he stays in keto, because he loves being in that space.
It feels, yeah.
Yeah. And I go, Todd, one meal a day. And he says, yeah. He said, yeah, but I got to be mindful of what I eat. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, you got to be mindful that you don't eat too much, right? And he goes, no, I got to be mindful that I eat enough, because I'm only eating one meal a day and I'm not that hungry. And this is what I find with a lot of people is that the hunger, when you are in a sugar burning, carb driven world, hunger is like the demon that drives you from one meal to the next.
The whole hangry.
Yeah.
Sorry for what I said when I was hangry.
Yeah. Which is every other thing I've said. So it's hangry becomes the biggest excuse in the world for being a dick, right? So I think when you become fat adapted and keto adapted, a whole new world opens up to you. And I suspect that in the next couple of years, we're going to see a tremendous amount of research that suggests that some people might only need to take in like 1,200 calories a day. Some guys might only need to take in 1,200 calories a day to maintain muscle mass and maintain energy, because they are so efficient at the use of those fuels. Because when you take fat, you not only take that triglyceride, you're not only burning the fat, you're actually also creating glucose, and then you're got some ketones coming out. So you got all these potential fuels coming out of one
sources,
energy source, one macro. So I suspect that we're going to see a world in which, well, first of all, we're seeing it now, where the 3 squares a day and breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Come on, seriously, you're still harping on that? That's crazy. But I suspect we're going to see a whole new set of research that looks at efficiency and, MED, the minimum effective dose of food. What's the least amount I can eat and still maintain muscle mass and, not get sick and, have all the energy I need and have my cognition. And, oh, by the way, not be hungry, because hunger is the thing that kind of ruins it all, right? If you have to force yourself not to eat, then you're doing something wrong.
Right.
And I've told people from day one on the Primal Blueprint, if you're not hungry, you don't need to eat.
Yeah. So I have 2 more questions, and I know our time is running out. One of them, of course, you would recommend your own books, but what other books would you recommend to anyone listening? It could be for entertainment, to learn more about what we were talking about, anything that's changed your life. Any books?
Any books. Let's see. Well, recently I just read a book called The Force. Yeah, and it's by Don Winslow, and it is an amazing look at a police force, a partially corrupt police force. It's one of the most well-written books I've read. It's a novel, and I don't read, like I just went to Greece for 2 weeks on vacation, and I brought 5 novels, big, thick novels with me, with my intention on reading them all while I was there. And I did. Because other than vacation, I only read technical stuff. I only read either technical journals, or I'm reading a script, for something I have to do, or I'm reading a manuscript of something I wrote, or I'm reading someone else's book in this genre that they want to forward or a comment. Right. So anyway, the Force. And then, let's see. I mean, Tony Robbins has a book called Money, Master the Game. Okay. I don't know if you've read it, but it's a really well-written book on money and how it fits into our lives. And I've had both my kids read it, and they were very appreciative that I made them read it. So
awesome. I don't have kids yet, but when I do, that's going to be one of my chores that actually pays. They're going to be expected to help around the house, but when they read things that are, good fuel for their brain, that's what I'll pay them for.
There you go. Yeah. Good.
All right. So my last question is one of my favorites. And I think even thinking about how you live and playing on Sundays, Frisbee, I think I kind of know the answer to this, but I've asked this to so many people and I love it. So if 8-year-old Mark had a crystal ball and could look, and you're in your 60s, right? You look like you're 40 something, but
I'm 64. Yeah.
64. Okay. So if 8-year-old Mark could look at 64-year-old Mark and the journey that you've gone through and where you are today on a scale of 1 to 11, how excited would he be?
Oh, 11. I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah. I had a feeling you'd say that.
Yeah. This one goes to 11. Yeah.
Spinal Tap. I love it.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for everything you shared. I know that, you've probably changed. I know your goal is tens of millions, but thousands and thousands of people so far, their lives, and I've met plenty of them. And I definitely feel like my life has been changed because of you and the way I've learned to eat from you. So thank you so much. And thank you for your time today. And thanks again for the keto box, because that's a lot of
course.
Awesome
thanks for having me, Maddie. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I thought that was pretty fascinating, and I wish I had more time with him because there are still some questions that I wish that I would have asked. So maybe he'll write another book soon and I can interview him again, because it really was a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed it too, and if you're intrigued about his book, you can check the show notes where you can pre-order, or if you're listening after October 3rd, which is tomorrow, you can buy his book. And if you're feeling lucky, you can also enter to win his book. So head over to www.mandiem.com, mandiem.com/episode 109. That's where you will find the show notes, pictures of Mark. You will not believe how fit he is for a man in his 60s. It's crazy. And then you can find his information for his websites and social media pages as well. And of course, like I mentioned, win that copy of the new book. Stay tuned for this Friday's episode where you will have a challenge from Mark. And make sure that you share this out with your friends and family and anyone whose health you care about. Wow, that's a really serious challenge. People are going to be offended if you don't send this to them, because they will know you don't care about their health. So you should really do it. Just kidding. Not really. I mean, you should. Anyway, make sure you leave a review on iTunes so that we know you love us, so iTunes knows that they should be recommending this to other people. And of course, subscribe so you have Mark's challenge on Friday. All right. As always, be bold and have a sparkly day. Bye-bye.